Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about freedom. And more so because we very recently celebrated our Independence Day, the day we reclaimed our freedom from the colonial rule. The day we were able to reclaim our freedom, not just on a human level, but on the very existential level, as a nation and as individuals, in my opinion, needs to be reflected upon. In my opinion, on the psychological level, needs to be reclaimed. And as Bal Gangadhar Tilak had said, freedom is my birthright and I shall have it. And if I could edit it slightly, I would say that freedom is our birthright and we shall have it. We actually have a claim over it. And so, in keeping with that, I'd asked a few people, or a lot of people, a very simple question. What is freedom for you? And what would you like to be free from? And in keeping with that question, I had received plentiful of answers as well. And to express my gratitude and to honor everybody's point of view, I'd like to share all the points of view that were shared with me. So, somebody had said, freedom is not to hide things from their loved ones. Somebody else had said, freedom to have the courage to tell my family that I love someone. Somebody had also shared, freedom to not have the baggage of carrying small or big lies. And they had gone on to specifically say, freedom to be honest without the fear of losing them or them disliking me. Somebody also had said, freedom to express my emotions and thoughts without being judged. Somebody had also said, freedom to have time just for myself. Somebody also shared, freedom to live without the concept of time management and constantly worry about managing money. Somebody also shared, freedom of power, of free will, of capability, development, and rationality to decide, freedom from my shortcomings, and from the inner and external freedom. Somebody had also said, freedom from monotonous behaviors. Somebody also shared, freedom to make big and small choices based on one's desires and needs, having freedom of time and financial freedom. Somebody also wrote, I'd like to be emotionally free. Somebody also said, freedom is having the ability to say no. Somebody also said, freedom to live with dignity, to express oneself, and to choose without feeling oppressed. Somebody also shared, freedom to make choices without fear, pressure, or comparisons, to be free from the inner conflict and to honor the family culture of placing others first while still staying true to my own path. Somebody also beautifully wrote back, freedom to be healthy and to be free of taking medicines. Somebody had shared, freedom to be disease free. Somebody also wrote back, sharing, freedom is not escape nor indulgence. To be able to move without hesitation, to act without the weight of fear, to strike without doubt. Freedom from delusions, from attachment to comfort, to praise, and to the fear of loss. Somebody once again using different words said, freedom from the opinions of others. Somebody wrote back saying, freedom from hypocrisy and double standards, essentially saying, freedom from disintegrity. Somebody shared, freedom from negative thoughts. Somebody shared, freedom from addictions. Somebody also shared a voice note saying, freedom from restrictions or having to justify and share about my whereabouts. Somebody wrote back saying, freedom from over explaining and overthinking. Somebody wrote back saying, freedom from my excessive weight. Somebody wrote back saying, freedom from daily chores and hectic, monotonous activities, freedom from job, from partner, and freedom to travel wherever, whenever, and with whomsoever I want to without any strings attached. Somebody also shared saying that freedom is not having any interference from others. Somebody also said, freedom from the secrets which I hold within me from my own people. Somebody wrote back sharing, freedom of expression of speech to eat what one wants and of livelihood. Somebody also wrote back saying, freedom to be financially rich without having to work. Somebody also said, freedom of thought process. Somebody also wrote back saying, freedom to do whatever I want to do without any consequences. Somebody wrote back sharing, freedom means different things to different people. Man can never be free. Some or the other responsibilities or thoughts will keep him occupied. Somebody also said, freedom from the virtues of society. To be a good husband, to be a good provider, to be a good father, to be a good son, and maybe XYZ things as well. Somebody also wrote back saying, freedom is scarce and scary, for it demands accountability. Accountability both for the choice made and its consequences. Somebody also wrote back saying freedom from stress and tension. Somebody said freedom from pain. Somebody wrote back saying freedom to learn new things. Somebody also wrote back saying freedom to just be another human without needing to behave and act like a superhuman, without the expectations of others wanting me to perform and behave like a superhuman, to be free from the job and perception of behaving like a superhuman. Somebody also said, freedom to be accepted and yet be loved with all of my imperfections. Freedom from the baggage of perfection, they wrote, is liberation. Somebody also shared freedom to not be in charge all the time, to not play and be the izzat holder, the one who holds the honor of themselves and the entire family all the time. Freedom to have the permission to make mistakes and not be shamed for it. Now, the next two did prick me a bit harder because they were spoken directly without beating around the bush. For somebody shared, I'd like to have the freedom to trust again. Someone also shared, writing back, I'd like the freedom to feel safe within my own family and the world that I live in. A slightly grown up kid had also shared, I'd like to feel free from carrying the burden of my parents' marriage, who I don't think like each other, definitely don't love and respect each other, and have often been reminding me that they are together because of me. And I'm confused if I should be thankful or am I cursed for life? Which reminds me of a very insightful and a beautiful quote by Carl Jung. Somebody also wrote back freedom to hold and receive love and care from another. Somebody also wrote back saying, freedom from my own hyper independence, which I know is a trauma response, or I'd say a reaction. Somebody also said, freedom from the expectations of the family, of society, and of the world. Somebody wrote back, I wish I would have the freedom to tell my partner that I don't love them, but I feel obliged and obligated to them. Like that dialogue from the movie Kalank, कुछ रिश्ते कर्जों की तरह होते हैं, उन्हें निभाना नहीं, चुकाना पड़ता है. And if I were to add something to that and put it in Hindi language, I'd say, कर्ज ज़्यादातर किश्तों में ही चुकाए जाते हैं. And unfortunately, हर कर्ज का एक रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट भी होता है जो चुकाना पड़ता है. To a degree, translating that into English would mean that there are certain relationships that are obligatory, that are like loan, that are like debt. And just like every loan needs to be repaid in installments over a period of time, the principal and the rate of interest needs to be repaid over a period of time or over a few decades as well. Somebody also wrote back saying, I wish to have a relationship with everyone that Bitty has with her dad. And since I did not get who this Bitty was, or rather their Bitty was, I asked them to help me understand who Bitty was, who was the Bitty that they were talking about. So they wrote back saying, Bitty from Bareli Ki Barfi, who had an amazing relationship with her father. Somebody also wrote back saying, I want to be free of expectations. And in my understanding, that in itself is an expectation, to be free from all expectations, invariably implying that we'll always be free to choose and to have different expectations. And the answers that I was also expecting to receive, which I did not receive, were freedom is peace, freedom is abundance, freedom is powerful. It gives us the power to choose to respond. And it's only the most able to respond, responsibility, who essentially can call themselves free. For reactivity is not free, but responsibility is always free. Freedom from feeling inadequate. Freedom is blissful joy. Freedom is courage. Freedom is choices. Freedom feels expansive and not contractive. Freedom is not bondage, but helps us bind and connect well together. Freedom is not bogged down and bound by shame. Freedom is not controlling, but liberating. Freedom from the shackles of unconscious reactivities. And if we can briefly encapsulate the whole of it, what almost everybody is saying is that they want to be free of the opinions of others. Well, on the flip side of it, on the flip side of the balancing scale, it would also demand that we free ourselves from the opinions that we form about others. And unfortunately, that's not how the reality works. To respond more appropriately, what we can do is we can choose with whom, with what, and how do we interact with. We can choose our responses with regards to that. With regards to having no expectations, my take is we need to have realistic expectations and gradually keep shifting the bar if it needs to be done, if any changes take place. Because again, realistically, having no expectations is just not a possibility, but having realistic expectations, communicating those expectations and being clear about those expectations reduces resentment and suffering to a very large degree. Like with this example of having relationships with everybody, like Bitty had with her dad, is an unrealistic expectation. But having the freedom to choose with whom we'd like to have those kind of relationships that Bitty had with her dad in Bareli Ki Barfi is a choice, is a free choice that we all have, at least in major parts of the world. Freedom from hypocrisy and double standards and freedom from lies is essentially one and the same thing. And somewhere they all arise from fear of not being liked, from fear of rejection, from fear of abandonment, from fear of being left alone, from fear of being shamed, from fear of being criticized, And in a way, it's then talking about living inauthentically, living with an inner conflict that creates psychological and relational distress. And any kind of a distress, intrapersonally and interpersonally, erodes safety and trust from relationships. Not just on interpersonal levels, but on a very personal level as well. For an internal chaos and an internal conflict leads to both physical and psychological disharmony and thereby dis-ease, both on the personal level and in the relational level as well. Somebody had beautifully shared that freedom to have more courage, to be more honest with regards to telling their loved ones or their partner certain things. And well, as paradox as it may sound, courage can only be developed by facing and confronting our fears, by overcoming our fears. And as weird as it may sound, fear is then needed, is an essential requirement to develop courage, to develop a brave heart. Somebody who had said freedom is having the ability to say no, essentially entailing freedom from being a people pleaser. And as Oprah Winfrey had once said, freedom to be free from the disease to please, to appease. Essentially entailing that one needs to start navigating, establishing, negotiating their boundaries, which of course is never easy. Well, some people had also expressed that to them freedom meant having no responsibility, to do whatever they liked, wherever they liked. Well, essentially, to a large degree, probably they have gotten mixed up between responsibility and obligations. While responsibilities or one's ability to respond is internally driven, is internally motivated, is internally directed, obligations, on the other hand, are external forces, are external factors. And not having that clarity kind of muddles up our understanding of responsibility and obligations. And as the mind architect Peter Crone has said in one of his quotes, that life will present before us people and circumstances to reveal where we are not free, where we are not able to respond, but are in constant reactivity. So let's once again reflect and question as to what exactly we'd like to be free from. Because weirdly enough and funnily enough, as much as we claim to be living in a free, democratic, sovereign society, most of us would have realized that on some level or on most levels, we aren't essentially free. And this Independence Day probably gives us a chance to reflect, a choice to reflect, that despite celebrating our freedom, we essentially need to reclaim and reclaim and reclaim our freedom time and time and time again. Because whatever we do not resolve does not dissolve unless we decide to change our response, unless we decide to at least become aware of the things wherein we don't feel free. Which once again prompts me to share the quote by Peter Crone. Life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. Where you're not responsible but are more reactive. And thereby, the agenda of life is to trigger those places, those people, those circumstances, so that we become aware of them, so that we get a choice to respond to them differently, which enables us become a little more free. Let's try and reflect on that, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.